Good afternoon, TGIF. Let's do some business here. We are doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money on the air right now on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. What a week, a wild, volatile week in the financial markets, ending with an up day and only slightly lower for the week overall after recession fears rekindled and gripped the market after last Friday's weaker than expected jobs report. On Monday, the week kicked off with a more than 1,000-point drop in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. That was followed by a roller coaster ride with the Dow closing up nearly 300 on Tuesday, down about 240 on Wednesday, a gain of about 700 yesterday, and a gain of 51 points today. Overall, the market moved higher today, significantly cutting the losses from earlier in the week as stocks staged a big comeback after the turbulence that hit the financial markets early in the week. It started in Japan with that more than 12% drop in the Nikkei average on Monday. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of 51 points, ending this week at 39,497. The S&P 500 moved to 25 at 5,344, and the Nasdaq ended higher by 85 points, settling at 16,745. For the week, the Dow down 0.6%, had been down 3.1% following Monday's close. The S&P 500 was off less than 0.1% for the week after sinking 4.3% on Monday. And the Nasdaq ended down just 0.2% after tumbling nearly 6.5% in that washout on Monday. The yield in the 10-year note has ended the week at 3.94%. That, by the way, is the sixth lowest level of the year, and that has impacted fixed-rate mortgage rates, which moved lower this past week. Another nervous weekend in the Middle East with the Israeli military reported to be working in close coordination with the Pentagon to prepare for a series of scenarios in which either Iran or one of its proxies could launch an attack or a series of attacks against Israel. We're watching the price of oil moving higher for the fourth day in a row this week. Drugstores being hit hard by burglars in the San Fernando Valley. Meanwhile, a string of burglaries of homes in the San Fernando Valley continues, especially in the Encino area, which has seen a 40% jump in break-ins over the past year. I'll discuss the latest on that with the Honorable Dennis Zine, former Los Angeles City Council member, retired LAPD Sergeant and current LAPD Reserve Officer. Dennis Zine will be coming to the line this afternoon. And you might soon have an unwanted set of eyes on you while you're driving. New AI cameras are set to be installed across the country to catch you using your cell phone behind the wheel or not wearing your seatbelt. States can now access billions in funding for speed cameras under President Biden's infrastructure bill. I'll discuss that and the latest car news this week in Car Conscious Southern California with Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, geopolitics, politics, and the whole works. Joining us live now, Steve Forbes, chairman, editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes Magazine, author of numerous books. His latest is titled Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve Forbes, thank you very much for coming to the line to wrap up the most volatile week of the year so far.
Well, it's good to be with you, and certainly is a timely time to get together. What a week.
Most definitely. Give us your impressions of what we just went through here.
Well, one was the wind down of what they call in the markets the carry trade. That is, Japan's had very low interest rates, and so you could borrow the Japanese yen, go into some exotic instruments or some convoluted trades, and they take advantage of the higher interest rates in the United States. Went overboard, the shorting of the yen and the buying and using the yen to try to make a lot of money. And those trades unwound, and when you have a margin call, you have to sell other assets. That's why you saw a 12% decline on Monday. But then when they realized Japan was not going to disappear from the face of the earth, as you know, on Tuesday, they had a 10% rebound. But what it underscores is the basic uncertainty about the economy, the fact that this recovery that we've been having has been a very slow one, and the Federal Reserve dawdling on interest rates. You pointed out that the 10-year Treasury bond is now below 4%, yet the Federal Reserve is still paying banks almost 5.5% on their reserves, at the deposits that the banks make with their reserves at the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, in effect, is having a disincentive for banks to lend, And this has caused turmoil, unnecessary turmoil in the credit markets, and also hurting the economy. The Fed, as we've discussed before, has this crazy theory that the way you cure inflation is by depressing the economy, slowing down economic activity. And so they're always behind the eight ball. They're slow to see the problem of inflation. Now they're slow to see that the economy is wobbling, not badly, but not great. And so they need a new way of predicting the future. You can't predict the future, and they should just leave the economy alone and let interest rates float to where they should, which would be much lower levels than we have today.
Markets rattled by concerns about a recession, which everyone expected all of last year, which didn't happen, but now renewed concerns based on that jobs report we got a week ago. What do you think? What's the outlook here as far as you're concerned on the economy? Are we going to see that what was a widely expected soft landing, a hard landing, no landing? What kind of landing can we expect?
Well, if you ever hear of a Federal Reserve official piloting a plane, get off of it, because they don't know what they're doing. And the fact of the matter is that whether the economic theologians call it a recession or not, we're in a very slow growth period overall, and you have over half the country living from paycheck to paycheck. So you may not call it a recession, but for them, they're under a huge amount of pressure. As you know, credit card debt is going up, even though interest rates have come down. The accumulation of interest on your credit cards goes up. And one of the crazy things about the way they calculate the cost of living when you get the consumer price index and other inflation indexes, the amazing thing is they leave off interest rates. So the interest rates you pay on the mortgage, on your credit card, on your car purchase, that's not counted as a cost of living, even though it's a very real liability at the end of each month.
On there live with Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes magazine. And his latest book is titled Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Of course, a lot of concern about inflation, which has really hit people very, very hard. What's your assessment on where inflation goes from here?
Well, I think the severity of the price rises is easing in certain areas, but that doesn't get around the fact that the cost of living is far higher than it was 2, 3, 4 years ago. And even though interest rates are coming down a bit, the cost of living is not coming down overall for people, most people. So you have a certain percent of the population, 10, 20%, that are doing just fine. But another big chunk of the population, I think it's over half the population, that is struggling. And the key thing is whether you're doing well or not, most people have no faith that the economic future is going to get better, that the country, most people don't feel the country is going in the right direction. So you're not getting kind of vigorous investment. Thank goodness for artificial intelligence, for all the problems we may have with it. That investment has been propping up the economy.
On there live with Steve Forbes, who also is a former Republican presidential candidate some years ago. If you can put your political analyst hat on for just a moment, give us your assessment of how the presidential race is shaping up.
Well, there's still a huge relief among Democrats that they have a candidate who was visibly declining physically and especially mentally with a seeming fresh face. And so they're very excited about that. Kamala Harris will get probably a bump from the Democratic convention, which starts on August 19th, a week from Monday, assuming you don't have a disaster in Chicago, which we had back in 1968. So assume she gets a bump, then you're going to see a real debate on the issues of taxation, on the issue of spending, on the issue of regulation. Can you keep the car you want, or are they going to force you into a car you don't want? Air conditioners that actually work, dishwashers that actually work. And so I think you're going to get a real debate on issues, especially on foreign policy. One of the things, questions that Kamala Harris has not yet answered is, did she support the administration's decision to, in effect, remove sanctions on Iran 4 years ago, which enabled Iran to sell over $100 billion of oil, which they weren't able to sell before, most of it to China, giving Iran tens of billions of dollars to finance the military and terrorist activities, which we see unfolding in the Middle East today. So she's going to have to, she can't duck those questions forever. So I think you're going to see a very vigorous debate on real issues. Right now, they're all focused on the oohs and ahs of the new ticket for the Democrats. and the new vice presidential nominee for the Republicans. But I think after the convention, starting with Labor Day, you're going to see a real debate. What direction does this country want to go? Raising taxes, cutting taxes, rebuilding our military, or not rebuilding our military? Very basic issues.
We've seen the polls all over the place lately. One notable poll for this audience is that President Trump scores high with voters on the economy, certainly. But having been through all of this yourself, what are your thoughts about polls these days?
Well, you're right. They're all over the place. And I think that most people are really haven't focused on politics. A lot of us, like you and yours truly, do. But most people are concerned with the basic issues of their jobs, trying to meet their monthly bills and the like. So I'm not going to take polls too seriously, either good or bad or whatever, until after the Democrat convention and really after Labor Day, when people really start to focus on on the election here and what is unfolding overseas, which is becoming very, very, very dangerous. I really fear of a major war breaking out in the Middle East.
Let's talk about that. Israel under threat of attack by Iran. This has been widely telegraphed, and looks like U.S. forces are also moving into that region. Israel on full alert. Let's talk about that for a moment. And what is your expectation on what's going to happen there?
Well, the Iranians are going to do something, but I don't think they're going to deliberately provoke an all-out war. And one of the things that really we have to focus on is, yes, we're moving forces into the Middle East, but what good are they going to do? As you know, the Houthis, which are a proxy of Iran, have devastated commercial shipping in the Red Sea. And normally in the past, our Navy would have cleared out the Houthi forces and our Air Force. But while we are firing hundreds of missiles to knock down the drones that the Houthis are firing at commercial ships and our own ships, we haven't taken them out. And that means we're going to have to attack at some point the Iranian Navy. We're going to have to really take out the Houthis. The Israelis made a good raid this week, but that's just a one-off. And because people wonder, as you know, for 200 years, one of the basic principles of American foreign policy has always been freedom of navigation, freedom of the seas. That is now under direct threat in the Red Sea. China's beginning to do it in the South China Sea. Are we able to keep the ocean lanes open to all shipping, international shipping? That's in question in the Middle East. Our Navy is being extended there. And those are the kinds of questions that need to be asked and debated. How do we preserve freedom of the seas? How do we prevent the bad guys in the world from controlling more and more of what happens in the world?
What's your reaction to the recent news that 7 U.S. personnel were wounded in a recent rocket attack at an Iraqi base? And in the past, of course, remember when we invaded Panama after a U.S. military officer, a lieutenant, was roughed up, President Bush invaded Panama. Times have certainly changed.
They've changed in a very sad way. You mentioned those 7 servicemen and women who were wounded in that attack on the base. By the way, that was the 3rd time the base was attacked, and by an Iranian proxy militia. And since October, there have been 220 attacks on U.S. personnel and bases, and only 10 times have we retaliated. What message did that send when they can do that and we don't respond? And I just was sick to heart to hear our Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, say, we're really upset about that attack that wounded 7 of our people. And by golly, we're really angry. Well, big deal. What are you going to do about it that really means something and that removes that kind of threat instead of just twiddling your thumbs and saying, don't do it again? And that's why you could get a war that no one really wants, because the Iranians and others see that we don't want to really defend our interests and do something that may be risky but meaningful in preventing these kinds of attacks in the future. And that's how things unwind when you don't respond firmly to those kinds of attacks and provocations.
On the air live with Steve Forbes, and of course this week the vice presidential pick by the Democrats, the governor of Minnesota. What are your thoughts about that selection, and also the policy differences between the two tickets as it relates to the Middle East?
Well, I think the fact that the head of the ticket, Vice President Kamala Harris, did not go to Congress when Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, made an address there. She's made it very clear she's is not a real fan of Israel and defending it, especially after October 7th. And Governor Walz doesn't seem to be much different. And that's a shocker, and that's a very, very real difference. And the Democrats are split on that. You have some who are pro-Israel, but you have many now, which would have been inconceivable years ago of the Democratic Party, that are really anti-Israel today. And that's one reason why we see this ugly rise of anti-Semitism. I just can't believe we're experiencing these things. But I was delighted, by the way, that Congresswoman in Missouri, who was very pro-terrorist, and she got defeated in a primary. But unfortunately, they're so worried about Michigan that they're not willing to stand up for our allies. And we need allies, especially as our military is not up to shape as it should be. And the infrastructure for the weaponry that we need now in the future is very, very bad shape. So we got a lot of catching up to do.
I know many in our audience will be turning to Forbes this weekend for analysis on this big week in the financial markets. Certainly it's a relief to see a very little net change this past week with the rally yesterday and a slight rebound today, easing the losses earlier this week. And we'll be looking for you on the major networks. I always love your conversations with Larry Kudlow and others on Fox Business and Fox News. Any thoughts here, what we might be expecting next week, and what do you see ahead for the markets here?
Well, I think the markets, what's amazing is, one, how resilient the American economy is despite all the abuses of recent years, but also as the markets are telling the Fed, lower interest rates. The fact that short-term interest rates are so much higher now than the long-term interest rates, the markets are lowering interest rates, even if the Fed is laggard on it. So the Federal Reserve, once again, as they used to say, day late, a dollar short. Now it's months late and trillions of dollars short. They should just say, let the market set interest rates. But I'm afraid we're going to have to wait until September next month for them to formally do what the market's already doing already, and that is lowering the cost of renting money.
Any chance, any visits to Southern California planned? Any book signings or any other events? Will you be out here in Southern California anytime soon?
Not in the next few weeks, but I'm always going out there, and I look forward to seeing you and other friends and then before the election. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And also,
Steve Forbes, thank you.
World Series. You may have a World Series coming. Who knows?
That's right. I know we have the Olympics in 4 years, so we'll save you a seat for that big event as Paris winds down here. So the Olympics here in Los Angeles.
I'm old enough to remember the '84 Olympics.
Under President Reagan and Rayford Johnson lighting the cauldron. Tremendous memories here, certainly for this area. Steve Forbes, it's always an honor and a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
Very great to be with you, Frank, and thank you. Keep up the good fight.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which, of course, includes Forbes Magazine, author of numerous books. His latest, by the way, is titled Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve Forbes live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. 790 KBC welcomes. Want to take a guess? Howard Jones and ABC with Haircut 100 coming to the YouTube Theater August 20th. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show. If you're caller 9, call right now, 1-888-795-2222. The tickets are furnished by Live Nation. Well, a positive finish to a rough week on Wall Street. It was a volatile week, but now that the dust has settled, major averages barely budged for the week. As it turns out, the Dow today closed up 51 points. The S&P 500 gained 25. The NASDAQ moved up 85 points. The yield in the 10-year note is back to 3.95%. Now that the dust has settled after that washout on Monday in which the Dow closed down more than 1,000 points, and we saw a roller coaster ride this whole week. We saw the major averages barely moving for the week. In fact, the Dow was down just 0.6% for the week. It had been down 3.1% following Monday's close. The S&P 500 was down just 0.1%, in fact, less than 0.1%, virtually unchanged for the week after sinking 4.3% on Monday. And the NASDAQ down 0.2% for the week after tumbling nearly 6.5% on Monday. Taking a look at Bitcoin, it too also had a very volatile week. Right now up about $100 at 60,796. Ethereum up 5 at 2,599, and Doge now at 10 cents. Now the latest news here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Drugstores being hit hard by burglars these days in the San Fernando Valley. Meanwhile, a string of burglaries of homes in the San Fernando Valley continues, especially in the Encino area, which has seen a 40% jump in break-ins over the past year. Pharmacies being hit hard this week. Let's bring in the Honorable Dennis Zine now, former Los Angeles City Council member. He knows that area very, very well. Also longtime LAPD Sergeant, current LAPD Reserve Officer. Dennis Zine is on the line. Thanks so much for coming to the line, Dennis Zine.
My pleasure, Frank. Good being with you today.
Yes, sir. What's your reaction to this latest crime wave there, especially on the drugstores this week?
Well, we know that with our district attorney, George Gascon, not filing charges against these continuing people commit crimes, it just continues out of control. It's like you have a broken pipe and the water keeps flowing. We've got a broken system and the crime keeps occurring, and we don't have consequences because we have a district attorney who doesn't do the job that he's elected to do. In spite of that, we have fear in the neighborhoods. We have a lot of groups coming together in the neighborhoods, banding together. Some of them are out buying guns to protect themselves or neighborhoods. We've got burglaries, but in addition to burglaries, we now have the brazen where they go in while you're in your residence, while you're watching TV, they're breaking in your home to steal from you. It is absolutely outrageous how the criminal element in Los Angeles City doesn't think there's any consequences. So we do have a situation that's taking place in the Valley, in particular, lucrative areas of the San Fernando Valley where these are taking place. They're burglaries. Now a burglary occurs, but then when they confront the owner or resident of the residence, now it's going to turn into a robbery or another crime of more serious nature. So clearly there's a problem. The other problem we have, and I'll be very candid with the listeners, we have a problem with the dispatch system of the Los Angeles Police Department. We don't have enough operators handling those 911 calls. And I'm sure some of your listeners have called 911 and it rings and rings and rings, and then they get put on hold. Meanwhile, there's an urgent need for the police. And then once the police are dispatched, it takes time to drive there. I was just recently witnessing a situation, a unit code 3 going to a hot prowler call with an individual at home, call the 911. And I saw the first unit go by code 3, blazing trails to get there. It took 10 minutes for the backup unit to get to the location. That is terrible response time, and that's reflective of the lack of personnel and the fear that people have. So what a lot of folks are doing, they're doing armament and themselves, their residents, to protect themselves because you can't get through the police by 911. And then once you get through, it takes time to get to the destination. So there's a serious problem with trying to provide public safety. And the brazen burglars, the ones that break into the stores, the commercial aspect, it just continues. They put up the iron gates. They break through the iron gates. It's really a situation that needs a lot of attention, a lot more personnel. And unfortunately, they're not recruiting the number of personnel they need to really get the job done. This is a problem. It continues day after day, month after month. And the statistics bear that out.
On the line with the Honorable Dennis Zine. Let me ask you this. There was a time when you put up a sign that said this area under video surveillance. Does that even matter anymore? When you see all of these videos of crime, do the police act on those? If somebody says, hey, I'm watching somebody take a safe out of my house, here's the video, and do they act on that video evidence?
Well, they do with the resources they have. I know an individual in the San Fernando Valley lives in a nice area, Woodland Hills area. He's got a video system in his house. All through the house, it's video, outside, inside. It was broken into. And I said, why didn't we determine what happened? He said they disconnected the system. These criminals are getting very sophisticated. When they know there's a video surveillance system, they will disconnect it. Somehow they disconnect it. They went in, they committed the burglary, got away, and he was only gone for a half hour from his residence. They got away with the goods, and there was no evidence because they dismantled the system. They didn't break it. They were able to electronically shut it down. And that's the situation that takes place. When people buy these sophisticated systems, they think they're going to be fine, but the criminal element is very sophisticated, and oftentimes this is what happens. So what the suspects look like? They disabled the system. We couldn't tell. So that's another situation. Don't think that if you do that system, it's going to obviously work every single time. Some of these criminals are educated, they're sophisticated, and they know how to go through the systems.
So many different situations out there. What about if it's clear you got a license plate on video? For example, there was a situation at a gas station recently. I happen to know someone that was robbed there, and the gas station had the vehicle and some people and the tags and all that. And is it that the police are just so overwhelmed they don't have time to go through all of that?
Well, Frank, you bring up a very interesting situation. My rear license plate on my car was recently stolen. Now, why would someone steal a license plate? They put it on another car. They go commit a robbery. Someone writes down the plate. They come banging on my door. You committed a robbery. My license plate was stolen. This is what these people are doing. And I mean, where they stole it from, I assume, is either my residence or a shopping center where I visited. But that's what happened to my license plate. And I took it for one reason. They want to go commit a crime with a license plate that is what comes back to another car. It's going to come back to me. But fortunately, it's on the record as stolen, and hopefully they can get apprehended and get my license back.
Well, what about these pharmacies? What is your message? And again, you represented that area, the San Fernando Valley, for many years. What is your message to those businesses here that have been in the middle of the night? They go in there and clear the places out.
This is happening over and over. The most recent, the officers arrived, the suspects took off, they got away. If you have an alarm system that is working, it activates, respond as quickly, notify the police, obviously. If you have friends, neighbors, etc., keep an eye out for each other. But this situation is really out of control with the crime trend. And while it goes up and down, peaks and valleys, they're more brazen, and they continually commit the same type of crimes where they'll steal the safe, break in the store, and they get in and out. They just had one recently where they stole a bunch of shoes from another store. And they've got the iron gates. So they don't care what you have to secure. They're going to break through. They're going to take what they want, and then they dispose of them. The police department's doing what they can. But again, I keep on emphasizing, they're short of personnel. They're short of dispatchers. If you're looking for a job, LAPD is hiring, and they're hiring for civilian people within the police department because they desperately need to increase the number of personnel.
We had Nathan Hochman on the show this week, who's running against George Gascon for DA. That election's coming up in November, a very critical election, right? Tell us what's at stake here.
Well, I've supported Nathan. I've given him money. I support him wholeheartedly. If Gascon gets reelected, I'm telling people you should move out of L.A. County. If he gets reelected, it's going to be 4 more years and probably worse than what we see now. Gascon has been terrible for public safety in Los Angeles County. 88 cities, people are suffering because of Gascon. Nathan's a good man. I hope he gets elected. I hope people think, you know what, we want to make a change. I know he will work with law enforcement. He'll do prosecution. You know, you don't see these problems in Orange County. You don't see these problems in Ventura County. Why do you see it in Los Angeles County? Because you got a district attorney that doesn't do their job. You got some city council members who are great. Tracy Parks is great, does the job right. And you got some council members that really don't care. So voters need to really look and emphasize which ones are going to protect me and my family and my property. That's what they need to look at when they're putting a vote. It doesn't matter what your political party is. You want to be safe, and your family needs to be safe, and your property needs to be safe. And it's only going to be done if we utilize the system that we have. And one more thing, Frank, I want to mention. The court has ruled that homeless is not illegal. It's not legal to do that, to live on the street. And the governor's issued a mandate, and some cities are saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're out of excuses. They need to address that situation. They can't ignore it, and they continue to ignore it. The same thing we have with the problem with the lack of law enforcement to do the job. A district attorney doesn't do the job. So it all mounts up. It's like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people impacted, and more victims, and more crime, and more problems that we have to contend with.
Yeah, thanks for raising that important point. The Honorable Dennis Zine, former Los Angeles City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, current LAPD reserve officer with something like 56 years of service to the City of Angels. God bless you for that, Dennis Zine. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Anytime, Frank. Thank you much, and good luck to the listeners.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And out to the freeways we go now, 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. You might soon have an unwanted set of eyes on you while you're driving. New AI cameras are set to be installed across the country to catch you using your cell phone behind the wheel or not wearing your seatbelts. Yep, these cameras can not only look at your car, your license plate and all that, but actually look inside the car. Okay, states can now access buildings and funding for speed cameras. Cameras like this under President Biden's infrastructure bill. Let's bring in the latest here now with Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. Lauren Fix in the mix here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Lauren, thanks for taking the call, and tell us what we need to know about these new AI cameras that are coming in.
Well, the AI cameras I actually got to experience personally when I was in England just a few weeks ago. And what they have is, we've seen red light cameras, and some states have outlawed them, but many are still using them. And you get a ticket if you go through a red light, or maybe you stop just over that line into what they call the box in New York City, which is obviously the intersection, and you can receive a ticket for that. Well, this goes the whole next step further. In England, and it is coming here, it's already been funded in the infrastructure bill from 2021, $15.6 billion is going to the states to put these cameras in. And seeing them in person is really dystopian. There's two cameras on each pole on each corner. One will shoot the exterior of the vehicle, and the other one literally can zoom in on the driver. And it can tell if you're wearing a seatbelt, if you have a phone on your lap rather than not anywhere near you, and they can decide anything else that they want to. And what happens is that picture or that video goes to an AI camera, a computer essentially, will decide whether you're breaking the law or you're not. Very dystopian. Then from there, you would have a person look at it and say, yes, Frank, you had your phone on your lap. Even though you may not be using it, they can decide to ticket you. So it's going to come down to a human decision. You will get a ticket in the mail. If it's something really serious, they can come and arrest you. Now, that is coming here to the U.S. It's already in place in the U.K., and it includes Wales and a couple other countries. So this is very concerning to me. You're taking our tax dollars to basically spy on us and assume you're guilty before proven innocent.
That is very big news. Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach, live on the air with us here. She's also the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast. And, of course, a lot of people here in Southern California have experienced some of the consequences of this technology with the express lanes that we have here. If you don't have a transponder or don't pay a toll or whatever, then you get that message in the mail saying you owe $50, $60, $70, $100 or whatever. That's we're going to see a lot more of that, you think?
Yes, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. What I keep seeing is more and more integration with computers making decisions. And so you're thinking, well, what about the police officers? Isn't that their job to pull someone over if they're doing something illegal? Well, there'll be less of them. They're going to use them for other things. I'm not sure what I could come up with some ideas, but I know that they should be actually helping serve and protect the community, which is what they prefer to do. Replacing people essentially with computers is always a problem, and in this case it's a huge problem, and the fact that they're using our tax dollars to do it. Now, here's the only good news with this. The money goes to each state, then it goes to each county and each city or municipality. At that point, they can decide whether to contribute and put those cameras on every street corner or not. Now, this is our last chance to say something. Your elected officials, whoever it is, you get a chance to talk to a city, a state, whoever it is, person that you're going to elect. You need to make sure that they're on the same page as you, is that you don't want to be spied on and be watched on every single street corner from 4 different corners. And that's exactly what they're planning to do. Now, many cities and states will join in on this because there's money. And that money goes to the cameras, and then they get support from the feds. So keep in mind that they really aren't incentivized not to install them, but we can incentivize them not to install them by saying, you're not going to get our vote.
I remember, is this the same infrastructure bill that you brought to our attention some time ago that also includes the kill switches that are going to be part of cars of the future?
Yeah, actually, it's not that far in the future. That is part of the same infrastructure bill. That's Section 24220. And I love to read these little bills after nobody else ever does, because when you find things like the kill switches, that's going to be in cars as of 2026. And I'm already reviewing 2025s. I have a brand new Lincoln Nautilus in the driveway. It's a 2025, and I'm going to review that. But knowing that next model year, they'll be not just tracking your eyes, they'll be listening in your car, and that push button start you put your finger on, it'll determine whether you're under the influence of something. And that's a problem. Now, Thomas Massey, our House of Representatives, tried to get it stripped out. And unfortunately, 19 Republicans voted with the Democrats. They believe that it has to do with drunk driving. Nobody wants you to drink while driving. Nobody. And there's already 30-some different devices out there that can stop you from driving a vehicle. However, this is under the guise of that it's for drunk driving. But in reality, there's going to be a lot of false positives, a lot of situations where people need to get somewhere. You're in a panic, you're stressed. The computer in the car will decide whether it believes you should start the vehicle. If you're too stressed, maybe you're having a bad day, maybe you have to rush to an emergency, whatever it might be, it can determine that you can't start the car. And the question is, how do you get out of kill switch jail? You can't call the manufacturer. They're not going to be able to help you. The dealer can't help you. The police can't help you. There's no answer how to get out of what I call kill switch jail, and that's going to be a big problem coming down the road.
Lauren, thank you very much for that thorough update. As always, Lauren Fix, editor-in-chief of Car Coach and the co-host of the Total Car Score podcast, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Well, we did see a slight uptick today for the stock market in what was a very volatile week. And for the week, the Dow actually ended up 51 points today. The S&P 500 up 25. The NASDAQ finished up 85 points. And for the week, the major averages barely changed. Despite the big washout we saw on Monday, the Dow was just 0.6% lower for the week. The S&P 500 was down less than 0.1% for the week, and the NASDAQ down 0.2% for the week. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 on Monday here on Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show.
Tucker Carlson, what is it that you think that people gravitate
I'm not
towards?
self-aware. I refuse to be self-aware. I don't even look in mirrors at all, which you can probably tell from my appearance. I don't have a crazy high IQ, or I really don't have that many skills. I would say my main skill is I believe my instincts. I don't hesitate to follow my instincts, ever. To the extent that I have, I've gotten in trouble.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.